everyone, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on strengthening the mental fitness of veterans and their families, helping them transition from military to civilian life, and helping them overcome adversity. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments. Go check them out at pivotalmoments.org to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen, and we are privileged today to have Colonel Retired Fran Trentley with us today. Colonel Trentley served in the United States Army for over 20 years. He entered the Army as a chemical officer in 1986 and held positions as a company commander of a chemical company and senior chemical staff officer for the 3rd Armored Division in Europe, which included support of combat operations in Operation Desert Storm in Southwest Asia. In 1996, Fran worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency, where he directed operations, maintenance, and information assurance of multiple classified information and intelligence systems supporting over 1,000 customers. In 1999, Fran served with the United States Army, Pacific Global Command and Control Systems Division to provide the strategic direction and day-to-day leadership of a fixed and mobile communications organization supporting all Army command, control, communications, computer, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems in Alaska, Japan, Okinawa, and Hawaii. I'm not going to lie to you, that was a mouthful, but we got through it together. From 2001 to 2006, while assigned to the White House Communications Agency, Fran developed and executed the wholesale upgrade of all tactical, operational, and strategic communication systems supporting the President of the United States. After retiring from the military in 2006, Fran took a senior executive position with Akamai Technologies, where he was responsible for the delivery of Akamai's global security and government services offerings. After 15 years of service with Akamai, Fran recently retired. And that brings us to the show. Fran, welcome to Life After the Military.
That was fantastic, sir. That was fantastic. Thank you for that intro.
I'm not going to lie to you, Fran. I'm glad I took a big gulp of tea before that, and I just took it a word at a time. That was one of the more tongue-twisting intros, but we got through it together. That's what matters. So thank you, sir. So, Fran, it's going to bring us to the first question. And I'm going to repeat some of that stuff to begin with. But you served in the United States Army for over 20 years. And again, you provided a wide range of support, including nuclear, biological, chemical operations, intelligence, counterintelligence, and information assurance operations, global command and control communication system operations, and developing and executing the wholesale upgrade of all tactical, operational, and strategic communication systems supporting the President of the United States. I just wanted to go through it again because that is quite impressive. So the question is, just tell us about your service and how that experience shaped you as a human being, your family, your life, and everything.
So remember, all of those words sound a lot sexier than it actually was when you were doing it, right? It reads really well.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I started thinking about how to frame it and how the military changed me, made me grow. And it really starts with some of your first assignments. And my first assignment was with the 3rd of the 7th Field Artillery. So I got out of school as a chemical officer. And at that time, it was funny because I asked, I was an ROTC guy. I went into ROTC. I asked for infantry, artillery, ADA, I think was my 3rd choice, and they made me a chemical officer. So at the time, I didn't even know what a chemical officer was. I had to go look it up, right? So I'm like, okay, so fantastic. And I go to school and we find out later, and I'm looking around, and a lot of the guys that were at school with me were, for lack of a better term, big burly guys that looked like they should have gone to the infantry, and they all had the same kind of experience I had. They'd asked for combat arms and they had gotten, the chemical corps. And we realized what they were trying to do at the chemical corps is make sure that they could relate to some of the units that they went to support, artillery and infantry and everything else. So they were trying to get away from the white lab coat kind of thing, more to uglier guys like me, right? So you could send them out, and they could talk to the infantry in grunts and groans. Oh, right? So how he can relate. So my first assignment was the 3rd of the 7th Field Artillery, which was a cohort unit. So I got to Hawaii, which good deal, right? You can't beat that for your first assignment. You get there, you have empty barracks, you have empty motor pools, and you have a staff of maybe 6. There's no SOPs, there's nothing. There's nothing in writing, there's no paper, just empty offices. And your units and gear are all coming in big lots because they're building this cohort 105 Field Artillery Battalion, basically all in one shot. Boom, it starts appearing. the gear starts showing up to the motor pool. The kids are coming out of, and I say kids now, but the soldiers are coming out of school all in one big, bunch at a time. And your job is to what? You got to build all the processes. You got to build the training. You got to build. So you go steal. You go out to other battalions and you say, hey, you got an SOP for this. Let's take a look at that, right? You take that, you start motion it. Hey, you got training plans for this? How do you do training? How do you do this? How do you do that? And it really forces you to go out and do one of those things that we were talking about, exchange ideas in this forum and go make friends and see what they have to support you, because you got to build it all from scratch. That was a great experience, right? It was terrifying to begin with, but it's a great experience when you have to build it all from scratch and you realize the things that you need for an organization to function. You need to build all the processes, you need to build all the training for the process, you need to build the SOPs to make the team efficient. And it was a great opportunity to be involved with all that. So then, I went from that position over to a brand new dual purpose smoke decon platoon. So I was a platoon leader in a smoke decon platoon, light infantry. Again, this was in 25th ID, light infantry division. And I just got done saying again, brand new, right? So this smoke decon thing was a new concept. So no SOPs, so we built it all from scratch. And nobody at that time had ever air mobiled a Humvee with smoke generators on it with fuel to be able to drop in and do missions. It wasn't even part of our tactics at the time. So that was all new stuff that we could build again from scratch. And it became an ongoing kind of philosophy. How do we be the best? How do you make the organization the best they can possibly be at what they're supposed to do? And then once you get there, like, how can you be the first to do something else, right? What's the next thing? So that's served well. Then off to school, then, different assignments, off to the 3rd Armored Division to go to war. Came back and did a command after that. So I was actually part of the staff of the 3rd Armored Division when we went to the first Gulf War. Came back and did command after that, and then started transitioning to 53 jobs, so systems automation jobs. So I did as a commander, I was a troop commander in the 1st of the 1st Cav, and I owned the 1st Armored Division's chemical company. So I had armored smoke vehicles, I had armored recon, chemical and biological recon vehicles, and a lot of rolling stock. That's a whole nother, and 170 young men and women, that are all looking for trouble in Germany. That there's a whole nother pile of stories there. That if you haven't had the responsibility to lead our young sons and daughters.
Fran, we'll do an anthology series with you. There'll be no names mentioned. This happened in Germany, I
used to have this young specialist, and she was a supply specialist, and she was fantastic. I could send her out, and she would come back with whatever we needed. But I used to tell her, and I won't use her name. She'll probably get me if I use her. But I used to tell her, you see this gray hair? This is from being a troop commander. You see this gray hair? This is just you, just you.
And Fran, of course, I'm sure you learned early on never to ask the question of where did you get that from, right? You never ask that question. It just shows up and you say, hey, let's just get it on our property book and we're good to go.
Books, right. That's funny, but let's I'm going to dig in and I'll tell you a funny story. So I'm changing command. I'm outgoing. And we count, you go through your property book and you count all your vehicles and you make sure you got a vehicle for every serial number that you've got on your property book, and you count through, and I kept counting through. We'd go, piece by piece, and I had every piece I was supposed to have. But then I'd go to the motor pool and I'm like, we got one extra here. There's an extra. Right. And you'd go through again, right? It'd drive you nuts. It was like counting those magical stones that never came up to the same number, right? So you go through them all again. Yeah, I got every serial number I'm supposed to have. Then you do the count. I got one extra. Where'd that come from? Nobody knew where it came from. I had an extra truck, right? So I had an extra. extra copy that the maintenance guys were using, and I didn't even want to know. I'm like, just get it, give me the paper, let's get it on the property book. We'd have forever, right? But you didn't think to count the things that weren't on your property book. You paid attention to what you had, what you had signed for. So anyway, funny story. Anyway, so done with command, come back, do some staff jobs. And I actually did some very interesting work for Soldier Systems Command and Army Material Command as the Chem Bio guy. And I got the opportunity to do some at that time, this was an exciting kind of new thing for counterterrorism and anti-terrorism for bio weapons. And I got to do some bilats and trilat treaty work, which was very exciting and scary, terrifying as hell. And if anybody asks you, why would you transition from, chem bio nuke stuff to IT, that job would scare the boogers out of you, right? And
right.
Make you realize this is not a place, this is not a job I want to continue. This is depressing. Let's go find something that's less depressing, right?
Well, I'd say that I'm imagining that the whole world has about a 5% understanding of that now with what's going on everywhere, and it probably doesn't even scratch the surface of what
5%. Yes, sir. Yeah. I would say 5%. Get your shots. That's my bottom line.
I'm all for that.
Get your vaccine as soon as you can. That's a terrifying place. And the challenge at the time, and we've gotten a lot better, is that you could masquerade as a research facility and get different types of agents sent to a post office box where you could grow. And the challenge with the challenge with biological terrorism is that there's not a good signature for it. Right. Nuke, there's a signature you can find. Chem, there are certain things that you can see when you're making it, right? That you can kind of link in on. Bio. You can make beer, you can make bio. That's the problem. There's very low signature for it. So great experience, terrifying, terrifying, and good time to switch to IT, which I did. So then I did work at DIA. And we were putting in, I'll basically show my age in that right now. We were fielding NT40, right? So, that was back in the day. And we literally had to have classes, this is funny, but not so funny, for how to use a mouse, because we were training analysts that had always been command line. So you literally had to send them to a, 40-minute class on this is how you use a mouse. Right? It's kind of like us trying to get used to trackpads, maybe. I don't know. But at the time, they'd never seen a mouse. It was terrifying to them, right? Anyway, so then off to field our GCCS, Global Command and Control Systems, Army in the Pacific. And I owned the Global Command and Control Systems facilities for the Pacific. So that's where you get the piece that supports C4ISR. And at the time, we fielded a new capability to kind of do what we're doing right now with 3 different locations. We could do audio visual, and I remember showing it to the staff when we were down there, and it was infantry, right? So I'm at USERPAC, and we bring up a point-to-point link on SIPRNet to a ship at sea. We bring up another point-to-point. We brought up another point. I can't remember where we brought it to. I think it was Okinawa, and then had Okinawa and the ship at sea get another point to point. So literally we had 3 different locations in this conversation, right? And it was like I had just invented fire. So it's,
I remember this. Because I was doing essentially the same thing down the 112th at the time. It was, and we were probably dealing with about a 64K kilobit link, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 128, right at best.
Maybe 128, best case, 128. So now, so very exciting, and now you're sharing maps and you're drawing on stuff. It was incredible. Like, they were super excited. And I tell this story all the time, like, if it's like fire, right? And all the infantry guys in the room are grunting and groaning and it was great.
What's amazing about stories like that, and I mean this, is that you hear stories like that from many generations past. You hear, like, I remember my father used to talk to me about how they used to deliver milk on a horse in the morning. My
Right.
father's 81 years old. And then my brain turns to go, well, what's that today? What are the things I don't know about that guys are about today in the military? And or anywhere really, and it's like, it's got to be stuff like you could probably have a hologram in a room with someone, but
It's
it's
heads-up
amazing.
display with threat. So we were at the time, you remember, I know Howie remembers the Blue Force, Red Force tracking systems, right? So you were trying to get, and at that time, like the Intel guys took care of red tracks and the ops guys took care of blue tracks, and never the twain shall meet. And it was a religious battle trying to get them on one visualization, like try to give me the blue and the red on one visual, because literally they're two separate systems. You couldn't get them on. And the big challenge at that time was trying to get them fed into one system, and who was going to take responsibility in that, who was going to own it. And oh my God, we don't have the resource to do that, blah, blah, all kinds of drama going on. But that's like the heads up display now that gives you blue and red force tracking. That's slick, right? That's the now. Yeah. So from there, so I was doing command and control systems in the Pacific, and the USAPAC commander at the time said, love it. Give me mobile kits. I want to be able to do this from the field. So we built those. We fashioned them. We built them lightweight, everything aluminum, stands, some projectors, some smart boards, some everything on notebooks, and using the same email addresses that you used in garrison that you used in the field, which was that again, normally when you deployed, you got issued an address, right? You got an issue because now you have a different role. So for that new role, you had instead of doing that, now we assigned roles to their existing email address. So it made everything a lot smoother. So your transition to the field was amazingly smooth, right? You just went out and you were on a different machine from the one that you had in garrison, which was genius, right? Brilliant. Worked like a champ and fairly straightforward, and not to tell you one more story. So my buddy was an Intel guy he was an analyst. And I went down to check his systems because I was an automator out in the Pacific. So I go down and I'm like, dude, what are these boot marks on this printer? Like why are there boot marks on this printer? He's like, that thing freaking, like he just goes into this big long rant. And then he rants about having to be able to switch over cables and be able to print from one classification and, either from JWIX or Cybernet on this one printer, because that's the only printer they had. And it was funny because an automator looks at those things and they're like, that's a simple thing, right? There were certified devices that would allow you to print from multiple networks onto the same printer. It's just one way, right? You can do that. It's a little cheap. It doesn't cost a heck of a lot of money, but you got to go look for those opportunities to make things simple for the operator, right? And you go, oh, that's cheap, simple, easy. Let me fix that for you. And it's funny because I saw those same challenges even when I was at DIA. Director of ops, he's managing multiple networks all the time. He's got one printer, trying to get gobs of printers in his office, and you just have to do a little bit of work to get one certified, configured correctly, and to simplify his life, if you will. Okay, so from there I got so I'm running the command and control systems in the Pacific, and I remember my NCO and I leaving our building. I had a beautiful view, a beautiful office. I had an old Wimix. You remember Wimix? Howie, are you?
Oh yeah.
So it was an old Wimix building. So they were mainframes that used to do command and control. And now I had servers. It was client server. We moved to with global command and control systems. And I remember my Hawaiian, my guys from Hawaii used to go, and they'd have to go up to the server room. They would put on these snorkel jackets. Now we're in Hawaii, right? It never gets colder than like 80. But because they had to go up to the server room, they had these snorkel jackets, like you're going to Alaska, right? On the back of their chairs. To go up and manage the servers. Anyway, so I had a beautiful facility, had a gorgeous views of Pearl Harbor and up into the mountains. And I remember leaving the chow hall in the morning with my senior NCO. And I'm like, look at this beautiful sunrise, look at the mountains. I can't wait to get the hell off this rock. Because we had we had fielded everything. And at that time in my career, and Howie will probably, he'll probably commiserate, you're getting stuff done. Like you wake up in the morning, you finish your 8 espressos, you take a big dip of Copenhagen, and you're ready to get stuff moving, right? You're ready to go do PT and then get moving. And if you don't have something to do, it starts driving you nuts, right? If you don't have a goal, if you're not driving to get a mission complete, that starts, you're looking at, because you're used to running at such a pace. And if you don't have that pace, it starts driving you. So this was 2 years doing command and control systems, and we had fielded everything, and it was rocking. And we've got our own comm systems coming up. We've got our mobile kits out. We've deployed stuff out to Okinawa and Japan and Alaska, and everybody is talking to each other. Video now, they're all excited. And now I'm kind of bored, right? Because we fielded the system, we signed off on it. And I get this ask, hey, do you want to go to WACA? And I'm like, what is a WACA, right? What is a WACA? I have no idea. So Branch calls me, you want to go interview? You got to go interview, right? So I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let's give it a shot. It's in DC. Sure, I'll go back to DC. So I go and do the interview, and I can't remember. You remember her name? Who was the commander at the time? It was before.
Oh, Peggy Baldwin?
Yes. So I interviewed with Colonel Baldwin, which got the job. So whatever I said didn't push me out, right? So that was good. But and I got there, really kind of showed up for work the second week of August, had to be the second or third week of August, after I took some leave in between coming from Hawaii over into DC again. And I remember it's coming into Colonel Luster, right?
Al Luster, yeah.
Al, and sitting down and going after 2 weeks, right? And going through the assessment of the infrastructure. I had to sit down with him, and I'm like, listen, I love coming to a place that needs me, but I don't think I can fix everything you got broken in a year. And to Howie's earlier point, when we were talking, like nobody had done anything with the comms. It was really a mess. And so I'll tell you, when we get to like September 11th stories, because we're coming up on the 20th anniversary, I'll tell you a quick story of that morning, which was exciting. All right, so that kind of gives you then I spent 5 years at WACA and then retired out of there and went to Akamai. And I didn't go as a VP, I went as a director, and I ran the government services business there and grew that. And then in their infinite wisdom, I say that sarcastically, they said, hey, you know what? This is mostly PubSec's, mostly security. Why don't you build our security services team as well? And then so we grew that into, I think we're close to, it was a big business and 650 people globally. It was fantastic. And it was the opportunity, again, nothing there. You got to build the processes, you got to build the training, you got to build the SOPs, you got to build the standards and make sure that everybody's operating globally on the same set of standards. And it was something that the military had prepped me for. So,
hey, Fran, so listen, what I'd like to do before we get too deep into Akamai, what I'd really like to do is spend a little bit more time about your time at WACA, because as we talked about before we started recording this session, for those of you, and I know it's an impressive bio that Fran has, but I just want to share with you my perspective. I came to the White House Communications Agency. I served there from 2003 to 2006. So Fran was already a couple of years into the job there. And the position that Fran had was what we called the J5. And it's probably a little bit different than what you see the staff position of the J5. Normally J5 is like plans, future plans, like when you get into operational stuff. But the way we used our J5 at WACA, which is probably more of a J6 type functionality in WACA, is Fran and his team were responsible for how to upgrade presidential communication systems. And what happened just prior to my getting there, and this happened actually just as President Bush 43 took office, was we were infused with about $324 million to upgrade the entire presidential communications infrastructure to bring it up to some form of a modern capability. Now, we did not want to be bleeding edge. We probably wanted to be just under leading edge, but what we had was really old technology that needed significant upgrade and improvement. And and once we got the budget to do that, Fran and his team were responsible for figuring out what were the projects we needed to start putting in place for short-term, midterm, and long-term improvements. They were about a year or so into that process when I got there. And Fran, what I'd love for you to do is kind of explain what your role was there, what you did, how you kind of managed that whole challenge. Because and everything you said right now, leading up to this point in your career, it is so clear to me how that had prepared you for this challenge, because you had been doing it since you were a chemical officer, right? It's interesting to me that everything you had done up to this point in your career had prepared you for this very, very significant and potentially overwhelming challenge that you and your team handled magnificently. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about the challenge you saw in front of you and how you tackled it to make it successful. Because you brought the White House communication into the modern era of communications, and I'd love for you to share with how you did that.
So, thank you, sir. I will tell you, nothing prepares you for what we kind of walked into on that for the architecture that was there when I got there.
And Fran, you have to tell the story, the YW story of Bush in his limousine. You have to tell this one, man.
Okay, there's too many, right? So there's two.
I'm sorry, not Y, the YZ. What the secure phone in his.
Yeah. Push to talk, right? So yeah, it was so lots to unpack there. So let me tell you a quick story. I was doing assessments from the time I got there. I was doing assessments on the architecture, just walking around saying, okay, what do we own? And I came in as the ISD chief, the Information Systems Division chief. And I got there day one, and my predecessor walks up to me and says, "Hey, I'm your sponsor for the next couple of weeks. I'm being relieved. You are replacing me." I'm like, that was my welcome to WACA, right? Welcome to WACA. I'm being fired. You're replacing me. Let me show you around, right? Which is kind of how it worked there, right? So. And I'll tell you another story in a little bit. So let me walk you around. So we go back and kind of everybody's back there doing. We were successful on the backs of our NCO. There has never been a place that has been more clearly demonstrate that fact. We were successful on the backs of our NCOs. They did not have the tools. They did not have the capability. They made everything work through their pure raw drive, right? It was incredible. Go ahead, sir. Lee, you had a question?
No. Yeah.
So we go through, so we started going through. Now, remember, I just came from a command and control systems background. Everything was balanced across the theater. We had graceful degradation. You'd lose a whole, you could lose a whole, I won't say country, but you could lose a whole implementation and everything would still go. Things would move a little slower. It'd take a little bit longer to get things done, but it was built for graceful degradation, right? You lose that, it still works. You might lose a little bit of speed. You lose that, still works, lose a little bit of speed. You can still operate. When I got to White House comms, everything was single home. So we're having the conversation on literally on September 11th. I'm sitting down with my NCOs in the Bay. I'm like, okay, now let me go back to the network piece. So this is earlier, before September 11th, we had the network conversation. Like, what's our network look like? Does anybody have diagrams for me? No. Okay, can you just walk me through, can you draw it on the board? We have no diagram, we have no network diagrams at all for White House communications. And I'm like, how did we connect to the internet? Well, the mill aides said they were sick of this crap, connect us to the internet. So they took this enclave that was their enclave and they connected it to the internet. And they put a concentrator there so that you could VPN from the outside to come in, which one shared password, everybody had the same password and the same login to get into the, okay, so we're already demonstrating that we have some challenges, right? So no documentation, scribbles, this is kind of the way it's hooked up. They're the point net gear for me, and they're, okay, that's fantastic. Not good, not good. And anyway, no security on the equipment. Anybody that had that login and password could get in and had full access to the infrastructure. Okay, so we had two mainframes that supported NSE at the time. Actually, one supported NSE. One was turned into an unclassed system that was running production applications. But the intent was, like, if the TSSCI mainframe ever went down, then we just roll stuff over to the unclassed system, unconnect, kill all of the production applications that were running on that, and then we would run the NSE stuff until you talk to the IBM guys, which were on site. And they said, if that thing ever goes down, there's no freaking way it's coming back up. There's no chance you're going to get that over to that, right? So great, briefs well, but it's never going to happen. Technically, it's never going to happen. And we're really, really worried about this guy here because it doesn't sound good. And we're not sure if we turn it off, it's going to turn back on again. That's fantastic. Great. Welcome. I think I'm day 3. And so then we're having conversations. Now we're in September 11th, the morning of September 11th, and we're having the conversation about the most critical applications. What are our critical applications? Well, our critical applications is the location and how to contact the senior staff, POTUS, the VP, everybody, right? And this is the system that does that. That's fantastic. Where's the backup for that? Right underneath it. But it's its dumber brother. So if the top one doesn't work, then we really can't modify it if we're running off of the secondary. And I'm like, well, well, this guy 10 years ago wrote it, and that's where it is. So I said, well, how do you get into, we don't touch it. If it goes down, we reboot it. That's it, we reboot it. We don't know how to get into it. The guy who wrote it's dead. I used to say this all the time. So they're dead. Yeah, they're dead to us, right? We can't get to them, that we don't know who wrote it. They're dead. So as far as I'm concerned, they're dead to me. So primary system, how to get a hold of everybody, sitting on a box in the basement of our building. It's dumber brother right underneath it. Secondary system, but you can't modify it. Okay, fantastic. First plane hits. Nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on yet, right? And the news is on, and one of the guys comes over and says, hey, a plane just hit one of the Twin Towers. Okay, all right. Hey, where are the backups for the mainframe? And they're like, oh, it's in that rack over there, right? So we got a container column sitting over there for the mainframe, NSC systems, right? So the backups are tapes over there. I said, you got anything off of site? No, we got nothing off site. Second plane hits. Now we realize that we're under attack. We have no backup. Now we have multiple switchboards as how we can attest, but we don't have multiple copies of the data that's on this, how to find the president and what phone he's on and where everybody else is located and what phones they're on. We don't have any of that. So we literally start driving to get an application that we can cook off to a CD and get off site. And we threw the backups to the NSC systems into a van, and we're like, that has to be out of here, because we're thinking the next plane's coming here, right? This would have been, if they knew what they were doing, the next plane would have been on our building, because we were all single points of comms coming through that building at the time. It was a single point of failure. You can edit some of this stuff out, Howie, or anything that you think is bad, worse than we don't want to talk about, but everything went through that building. So now we get the stuff moving in a van off-site. I think it was a day, 18, 20 hours later, where we actually started getting some sleep and starting to eat again, but we were frantically building stuff and trying to get it to camp, right? So that Camp David would be a secondary, far enough away that if something hit our building, that we had something to operate from at camp. President's moving now. that, you know, everybody's doing all their things on September 11th. And right after that, when the guys went out to the berm and could see the smoke coming off of the Pentagon, and we were still in the facility for, I don't know, 2 days probably. Anyway, right after that, you start what you're supposed to do. You do your after action reviews, and you start building your list of all the challenges that you had. And coming from a command and control background, I realized fairly early that not having any diagrams for what our network looked like was one of those things you probably wanted to have. And not having any serviceable software running your most critical systems, probably one of those things you probably want to have. Having offsite backups to the mainframes, having mainframes that will actually work if you turn them off and turn them back on. There was a list, which now you understand why I kind of went out and said, I love coming to a place that needs me, but I don't know if I can do this in a year. And it actually took us 2 years, and 2 years now I moved from ISD up into the J5 to Howie's point. And I remember Cliff Need coming back, and this was when we were sending him to school and making him smart. And he comes back, he's like, we need a CIO. Everybody's got to have a CIO, right? So he does all the paperwork. And at that time, the J5 was just the J5. And then I became Waka's first CIO. And then I think either you took it, or I think you took it after I left. I don't know. Well,
yeah, Ward Hankey, who then became the deputy, he actually started up a J6 in Waka.
Yeah.
It might have been after you left or just as you were leaving, but it was Ward's concept to build out a J6 staff position. Yeah.
So at that time we had this. So we had a list of things that we needed to do, and the comms to Howie's point were. There were multiple problematic stories, like President Bush yelling at Joe Hagan, Joe, across the White House lawn, do you got those phones fixed yet? Not something that you want to hear if you're the guy responsible for phones, right? There were pieces of the drive up to Camp David that had no comms, there had no cellular signal, that needed to be resolved, right? Because you didn't want the boss to ever be without the capability to call somebody. And to Howie's earlier point, you have systems that degrade, that become less friendly as they can support less ideal environments, right? So you've got cellular that works great when it works, but when that's not working, you need to use YZ, or you need to use land mobile radio, or you need to use something else, and that becomes push to talk, less friendly, not what you're used to day to day. And there are all kinds of stories. So you need to push to talk, release to listen, which is what Howie was kind of getting to earlier, right? And nobody wants to tell the president, hey, sir, you got to release to listen. You push to talk, then release to listen when you're using that particular comm. So we come up with this huge after action review. We identify all of the challenges, and then we find out that, I think it was the joint staff assessment that was done a couple of years earlier. And we laid it out and we said, yeah, we should have, that should have been happening for ages. So we use that kind of as a strategic blueprint to lay out the portfolios. So we had a fixed portfolio and a travel portfolio. And, we laid out the portfolios that we needed. And then we tracked the different projects that rolled into those portfolios. And then because everything was convergent at that time, and we were cutting edge, like as much as Howie's like, we don't want to be bleeding edge. Some things we were bleeding edge. Most things we were cutting edge because we were basically leapfrogging technology. And I remember briefing at the Pentagon, and at the time they wanted us to go faster, faster. Hey, why aren't you using phased array KU antennas on the top of your vehicles? I'm like, sir, because they're not real yet. Right, because people brief them and they think that it's there already. And we were working with the developers, and we're like, they don't work yet, right? They're someday, but right now we're using what's available to us, the parts and pieces that are available to us. So lots of coordination. The Joint Technical Exchange Forum that we were talking about earlier, that's what we called it, the JTUF, Joint Technical Exchange Forum. And to Howie's earlier point, we got everybody. We built a plan. We got everybody to get eyes on it. So we got NSA involved, and we're like, hey, does this look right to you? Is this what we should be doing? We got DISA involved, and we're like, hey, this is what we're thinking. And to our earlier point at that time, did we talk about, hey, during this time is when everything was going converged IP, and not everybody bought into that, right? Not everybody believed in that. Even people within DISA, even though General Radke at the time was pushing, hey, we're going converged IP. You had some people underneath them that would come in and like, well, we're not sure. I'm like, you need to get out. So if you can't, if you can't help me get to what the DISA, director is telling me he wants me to get to, then you need to go and find me somebody, send me somebody that can help me get to what his vision is, right? We had NSA involved, we had DISA involved, we had everybody that we had great cooperation from our partners, Cisco and Microsoft, and we'd have them review this and say, is this, does this look right? Does this look right? And we'd go talk to people that had done the same kinds of things that we were doing, right? So we're like, hey, what did you do when you put in those your storage arrays? What did you think about? And if you had to do it again, what would you do different? How would you improve what you did? Like, what were your lessons learned? And we would do that, right? So we put in a fully converged infrastructure, all classifications over a black IP routed network, end-to-end encryption. And we were using the smallest encryptors that we could find and kept transitioning to smaller and smaller encryptors as they became available. All the trip kits were IP based and multiple paths. So we were trying to get multiple paths. You could throw anything into those things. You could throw a T1, you could throw MBs, you could throw ISDN, whatever path you could get, we could turn it into IP, push IP over it, and provide services at any classification on the other end. So it was really the direction that DoD was going, and which, to Howie's point, and we were talking about earlier, made us kind of the place to go to see it all work, because we were actually working it. We were operationally functioning over a converged IP network. So it was something to see. And we shared with everybody. We shared with every other special ops communication team that we could find and say, here's what we were trying to get a shot, right? We're trying to get a 20-mile shot in with max bandwidth. Here's what we found. This implementation, this worked really well. Here's what we tried, this sucked, right? Here's what we tried, and everybody would kind of do the same thing. Here was my challenge. Here's how I solved it. Does anybody have a better idea? Or, and it was great. It was a lot of great collaboration.
Yeah. So, and listen, it was a really exciting time to be there. And I could not have been in a better position than to have someone like you leading that effort. Fran, what I'd like to transition now to is, you decided around 2006 that, okay, it's time to move on. You'd accomplished what I think you wanted to accomplish in uniform. And so you started to you decided you were going to retire. And one of the things we want to do with this podcast is, there are many men and women who are in that position where, whether it's they're getting out of the military, they're retiring from the military, and regardless of how many years, what we want to be able to do is help them better plan and prepare and execute that transition from life in the uniform to life out of the uniform. Right. And so what I'd love for you to share is talk about what you did to plan and prepare for your transition. How did it go? What went well? What did not go well? And like you were saying earlier, if you had it to do over again, anything that you would do differently, because I think the men and women who are in that position now, that are getting ready to move on, what can we share with them that would help them be more successful in their own transition?
So how did I prepare for a transition? Poorly. But I will tell you some of the services do a great job kind of, ramping you up, getting your resume together, showing you what you got to put together. They do a really good job if you want to go do that transitioning stuff. But some of the things that they just don't have the experience. You don't know until you get out there, quite honestly, and you're trying to fill in the gap of what you don't know, because you're blind to it until you get out there and get some experience. I will tell you that I set up what worked well for me is I built I basically did a decision brief for myself. What are my evaluative criteria? What are the things that I care about? What are my screening criteria? One of my screening criteria, it may sound funny to you, was I wanted 30 days leave. That was it. That was screening criteria. So if I talked to an opportunity and it didn't have 30 days leave, that was done. Right. Yep. Thanks for playing. But I wanted 30 days leave because I was used to that. Right. I was used to that from the service. So you build your evaluative criteria. How far is the commute? All of those things that you would put into that. How far is the commute? What kind of facility am I going to work in? How much travel am I going to do? And then figure out what's good and what's bad for you, and then start doing interviews. So I can't tell you how many people have transitioned that have come and talked to me. And this is what I actually have a matrix. I don't have a slide here, but basically what I put on this slide is risk reward, right? You got across the bottom is reward, across the top is risk. And you have like basically a line that shoots up there, and you start talking about the different opportunities you got. You want something safe that's not as emotionally like jarring, then you go into it like a GS job, transition from a GS job. Lots of people do that. You're in uniform one day, you transition to a GS job the next day, you're doing the same job, you're surrounded by the same people, same environment. There's some transition there, but it's not super painful, right? And the reward is good and it's solid. It's not that bad. Now you want to take a little bit more risk, then you go look at an integrator or a miter or something like that. Now you're taking a little bit more risk. There's a little bit more transition shock, like when you do that, and then you kind of move up the scale. But there's more reward, right? You got opportunity for more reward. Then on the right-hand side, on the kind of right before the right-hand side, go to a commercial company, absolute, shock to your system, and you have the opportunity, high risk, high reward. And the only thing to the far right of that is startup, right? Go to a startup, very high risk, very high, opportunity for reward, but huge shock, right? Huge shock to the system. And I kind of walk through it and I'd say, these are the kinds of things that you need to understand. GS is great. MITRE's the next bet. Maybe go look for a lock-key job or something like from an integrator, and then kind of, walk up the scale where, again, that reward is higher, but the risk is higher as well. And the environmental change shock factor is higher as you go up that scale as well. And you can attest to that, right? Like, does that sound?
Yeah, I was on more of the high risk, high reward. And I had a pretty good shock to my system for about 6 to 8 months. Yeah. No, that is such a perfect metaphor and description for how someone could manage. Look, you're absolutely right. It's about what level of risk are you willing to assume, and how much of a reward you're looking for, and that's absolutely spot on what you just said. Yep.
And it's change too, right? It's shock. It's environment. You're changing. You're going through a lot of change when you transition, right? So you got to figure out how much change you're willing to accept as you go through that. Now let's talk about an even more important point. When you're in the military for 20 years, it takes you 18 months to transition to outside of the military. You got to know your brain's going to be doing weird stuff for about 18 months. If you're in 25, 30 years, it's a solid 2 years. So if you got past it, Howie, in like 18 months, you're ahead of the game, because I know, there are people that get out after that long, 25, 30, and it's very difficult. It's 2 years. It took me a good solid 18 months. After 18 months, I was good, right? I was good again. But there are things that when you transition, you're going to miss. You're going to miss the camaraderie. You're going to miss the more, whether you liked it or not, you're going to miss the morning PT sessions. You're going to miss the joking around. You're going to miss those things. You're going to miss the constant stress, even though you don't know it. You're going to miss the up-tempo, the constant up-tempo, even though you don't realize it, right? That's a big something that's getting pulled out when you leave the military, right? Even though you may not have, in hindsight, you may not have liked it when you're doing it, but it's something that is no longer there, right? That constant stress, that constant up tempo, that constant push, and that's something you got to get used to.
Frank, it's funny. I always like to mention this in the episode. We always ask this question: what happens when you leave the best team on the planet? right? The
You'll
military is
make
the
it
best
human.
team on the planet, right?
Yeah.
The point is we're finding, and again, we've done upwards of 30 episodes now, so we're starting to get some data based on these interviews. And every single person we've interviewed, everyone has said that we do not spend enough time on this. And actually, the number of 2 years, what you said, it takes 1 to 2 years to do this effectively, and you're still not going to be comfortable even if you do that. And we've interviewed several people. And Howie knows this, that, they stopped on a Friday and started on a Monday, and that was their transition. It's not possible to do it effectively without a minimum, I think, as you guys said, 18 months to 2 years to prepare. So if you're listening to this, again, we always reiterate this because we never know if you're listening to one or several episodes of the show. If you're heading towards that transition, 2 years is the mark right now, at least Howie, that I'm hearing from people that to make it somewhat comfortable.
Well, you're going to be, so there's going to be things, I don't know how to put it, Howie, maybe you can put it better, but your mind isn't right for about 18 months to, I don't know, I hate to use the word divorce, right? But it's an emotional, you're missing something, right? You still know it was the right decision, right? You can always question your decision, that kind of thing. I never went back and said it was the wrong decision. I always thought it was the right decision, but that doesn't mean you're not going to miss it.
Yeah. I think, and Lee, you're exactly right. What we talk about a lot is in your preparation to take 18 to 24 months. What I think Fran is bringing up here that's a little bit different than what we've heard before, but it is actually very spot on, and I hadn't really thought about it, is now you are transitioned, and it could take you anywhere from 18 to 24 months to adjust to where you are and be successful. And what happens, and this is statistically proven, is if you did not do what Fran did, and I'm not saying you have to do a formal decision brief to yourself, but the point is, if you did not go through some kind of a reasonable decision-making process and establish criteria, whatever they may be, it could be, salary, paid time off. It could be, other types of benefits like medical, dental, vision. There's a whole slew of benefits that you probably want to consider as criteria to assess. And and listen, I think the most important one, at least it was for me, was the culture of the company or the organization you're going to. Because from my experience personally, and from what I've talked with many people, you can get paid a hell of a lot of money and be absolutely miserable because the value system that you operate by personally is not consistent with the cultural norms and values of the organization. And regardless of what you're getting paid, how much time off you're getting, whatever kind of incredible benefit you get, you're going to be absolutely freaking miserable because it's just not a good fit. Right. So I think what Fran is saying here, I think it's absolutely incredibly valuable, is establish what your key criteria are for you to be happy. And I would absolutely include one of those criteria is the culture and of the organization. Does it fit your value system and the way you like to operate? Because statistically, folks like Fran and myself and many others will have changed jobs 3 or 4 times in that 18-month period, right? Now, obviously, Fran did a really good job of creating his decision brief and making a decision, because he joined one company and stayed with that company for 15 years. I will tell you that is not the norm.
Let me drive your point. Let me drive 2 points home that you just mentioned. First, I tell people that all the time. You can't get paid enough to be miserable. So you have to you can't be paid enough to be miserable every day going into work. They just can't. There's no amount of money that makes that worth it. And you absolutely have to make sure that you're going to, when you say the right culture, look at the leadership, look at the CEO, right? I've had great CEOs in Akamai, love them to death, would take a bullet for them, right? So just fantastic people, the right culture, the right morals, that's hugely important, right? Hugely, hugely important. You've got to be able to look up to the leaders of the organization, and you got to feel good about the mission set. right? What are you trying to accomplish, right? Is
Right.
that something I'm interested in doing? Does that drive me? Does that make me excited every day? That will get you into the right company. And then after that, it's building the team, and you're there for the team, right? Why do you hang for as long as you hang? You're really there for the team. And as long as the leadership stays solid, you're good.
Yeah, and Fran, we're going to jump into Akamai here and why you chose to spend 15 years with that organization. But I want to say, again, two things real quick. When my wife transitioned out of the Air Force, I remember having these conversations. Like, people commiserate wherever they are. That's kind of a natural order of being a human being. So even when she was in the Air Force, there was mild commiseration. I used to tell her, listen, Janet, when you get out and you get into the other side of this, that's going to be way worse than it is here. I said, you guys are all committed to the same mission here. You're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And I said, the mission outside of the military is the bottom line. And the bottom line is not the same mission that you have here. So that's one thing, and then to echo what you said, look, it's always who you do it with, not what you're doing, right? If you don't enjoy the people you're doing with, it's going to be a tough fit no matter what. And this is completely in line with what you said. The mission has to be there as well. The leadership has to be there as well, but it's all built by people. And I've always said this, I've always posed this question. Would you rather be a garbage man or woman with your best friend, doing what they do, or work at a professional baseball team and hate going to work every day? Right. And the answer is always taking out garbage, as much as you might love a sport or something like that, because it's who you do it with, not what you do. The other thing I wanted to say, building on both of your points, kind of pre-transition and post-transition, I came to this conclusion from listening to everybody. It's like having a kid. It's look, you usually get about 8 months to prepare for your first kid if you're lucky, right? And here's the deal: it doesn't matter how much prepared, you're not prepared. Doesn't matter what you do, you're not prepared for that kid to be here. And you kind of fall into it, right? But so transitioning out of the military is to me kind of the same life type situation. Like, you can prepare as much as you want, and you should, but the truth is you have to be prepared for that you're not prepared. You have to know that it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough transition. You're going to be dealing with a completely different side of society that, and again, does not understand the level of teamwork, the level of determination, the level of standards that the military has. The civilian world, just by and large, does not have that. Not to mention, we have a massive lack of leadership to begin with in that sector countrywide. So again, for those of you transitioning, and friend, you're making this point, and again, you've done it somewhat well, right? You have to mentally prepare yourself for that, because it's going to be hard. All right, we have not had a guest that has not mentioned that. It is going to be a tough transition once you transition. Now, again, and feel free to comment on that. I do want to mention this though too, because Howie did. You went to Akamai Technologies after you were the vice president responsible for the delivery of global security and government services. The key stat here, friends, you spent 15 years there. Now, Howie said this, that is unbelievably rare, not just after the military, that's just rare to begin with. 18 to 36 months after transitioning, most people might change job 3 times. Even in the civilian world, it's just not common to have a job that long. So with that in mind,
especially with today's workforce, right?
It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Like, it doesn't even happen in pro sports anymore. You have a player with a team forever, right? Even Tom Brady's not doing that right now. So just help our audience understand, like, why did you select to work Akamai? And why did you stay there for so long? What did they do great? What did you do great that made that work? And how did you have a 15-year relationship with them after transitioning out?
So I'm a stubborn Irishman, and I won't quit. That's one of the.
there. That's the end of the episode. Stubborn. I'm writing that down. Stubborn Irishman that won't quit. There you
go. So to be clear, so this is it's interesting. So let me make a side comment before I get into that. I always tell people, I want you to do, when people come and ask me about transitioning, I talk to them about the longer you've been in the military, the quicker. And Howie and I both know people who are retired after 25, 30 years and died the next day, right? They're done. Heart attack, gone. And that's a really hard transition. I'm saying most times it's just 18 months of not feeling right, and then you're good, right? So, but if you lose feeling in your left arm, you need to go see a doctor. But yes, normally it's, you're just know you're not alone. Everybody goes through it. That's probably the biggest thing, right? Everybody.
That's a great point.
Leave the military, realize you're not alone.
And more people need to hear that. More people need to hear.
The longer it's going to take you to get your head on straight. It's fine. Everybody goes through it. Okay, so now back to your Akamai question. So here's kind of the way that worked. And I tell everybody, I want you to do at least 5. Promise me you'll do 5 interviews before you make a decision. And don't let anybody bum rush you and say, hey, I know you want to do other, we want you to close you today. What's going to take for me to close you today? Because you're going to get those, right? You're going to get those interviews. Or what's it going to take me to get you on board today? And what you need to tell them is, hey, listen, I promised somebody that I would do these other interviews. Go do them to get the experience doing it.
Great advice.
To get the experience doing interviews and understand the breadth of what's out there. At least 5, 6 interviews. Go do them. Even if you don't intend on taking any of those.
Fred, can I jump on that real quick?
Yeah.
Just additional on top of that. If someone does make that kind of offer to you, all right, and I know this because I mentor a lot of people on interviews, right? Yeah. If someone does make that offer to you, your brain might go, oh man, this might be my chance. Focus on the other side of that. Wow, someone's willing to do that for me today. I wonder what else I could get if I go other places. It's a good leverage point.
If they're willing to do that, they'll be willing to do a little bit more tomorrow.
Right, and I remember this. Go ahead.
What you have to say is, I really appreciate it, but I made a promise. I promised that I would do these other interviews before I make any decisions. So I just can't, right? And that's a good answer, right? I just can't.
It makes you more valuable too.
I promised that I would do these other interviews before I make any decisions. I've got to go do those. I appreciate the offer. I'm very interested, but I have to go do these other things first. And do them and go do the interviews, right? And then make sure that you understand. And Howie mentioned a bunch of the things that we are not well trained in, like total compensation. Like, what does that mean? That's base pay, that's bonuses. What's a bonus structure? How often does it happen? How does that work? Because that's all part of that total compensation. What's the healthcare? What's dental? What's vision? Do you have vision and dental? And what's that going to cost me? Because that's going to come out of my base, right? And those things are all important that we have no idea about when we transition. Right? We're absolutely untrained in those areas. So absolutely have the conversation with somebody who's been through that to understand what those things are and what total compensation means, right? And what are those things that you should be looking for? Okay, so I did my bunch of interviews, and then I had made some decisions, and then I got a hard sell from somebody who I owed, and then they got Tom Layton to give me a call. And Tom basically said, hey, listen, your life's long. You can always you can always do a bunch of stuff. To Howie's point, you're going to have multiple jobs. I need you for a year because we're trying to do this thing with this, and I need you here for a year. After that, you can go, if you're not having fun anymore. And I told him, I'm like, Tom, I get bored easy, right? I get bored easy. If I don't have something that's driving me all the time, I have a short attention span. So I went, I agreed that I would come for a year, and I stayed 15. And I started as the director. I was leading our government services piece. And then after that, I had the opportunity to start our security business. Tom decided that he wanted to turn Akamai into a security company. We made the transition years ago, and we built the security services team globally. We had always provided, it made great sense from a company perspective to pivot in that direction because we'd always provided a security capability. So we built out, I had the opportunity to build out the security services team. And it's, to your earlier point, great people. I had the opportunity to work with outstanding people. It was brilliant, and I never woke up without something driving me, something that I had to get done. I was always interested in the work, and we were always growing something, which I like doing, right? I like growing high performance teams, and that's fun.
Hey, so, and actually, I'd like to I was kind of hoping you'd go there, Fran, because again, as I think about our audience and how we can help them, this is a perfect example to kind of reinforce the things that you learn to do in the military, I'm talking about you and everybody else in uniform, especially if you're in some form of a leadership position, maybe you don't understand all the business speak, maybe you don't understand, how to, especially if you're doing government contracting type work. And it even is true in other work. There's this whole request for proposal and all that whole process. You're going to have to learn that stuff because I don't know any other way you can prepare for that than just by going through it. And you won't have unless you do what they have now is that 1 year or 6 months of transition where you're actually working in a corporate position while you're still on active duty. You're just not going to have the chance to learn that stuff, but you will learn that. But what you do have are the leadership qualities of how to properly motivate, inspire, and build a high performing team. And that's exactly what I would like you to talk about, because not only did you make, from the criteria you established to make a decision to go to Akamai, but I would absolutely guarantee you that if you talk to the teams that Fran led at Akamai, the reason they were so successful, the reason he was successful at Waka when I saw him for three years, and the reason he was successful for 15 years was he took a lot of the skill sets that he learned in the military and applied them in the business world. And we're talking about leadership now. We're talking about building a high-performing, highly successful team. And so what I'd like you to do, Fran, is just kind of share some of your experiences there of how you did that, because to me, that's a great opportunity for folks to see, okay, I am armed with so many qualities from my time in the military that now is sorely needed in the business world. So talk about how you applied that, how you built those teams, because I know you did it very well.
So it's a great conversation, and we could probably do a whole nother session on it. I'll hit it at the highest level. You come in and you got a problem, right? Or you got a mission statement, or you realize where it is that you need to go. And now you know where you are, right? You do this in the military all the time. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. All right, let's build that path. Well, let's build the plan to get from here to there, right? As long as you can identify those 2 points, you can come up with a plan to get from here to there. So how do you do, what's the leadership portion? Everybody knows where that's supposed to be, right? Everybody's going in the same direction. They all know where the lighthouse is. They're all heading to the lighthouse. That's where we need to move, all right? This is where we need to move. Here, conceptually, everybody needs to know what the mission is, right? What direction we're moving in, what we want to be. What's the vision statement? Communication, everybody needs to know, right? Everybody needs to be heading towards that same vision statement. And then from a leadership position, what's the most important thing for morale? You know that what you do every day is getting us to that thing, right? You know how what you're working on every day supports the bigger mission to get us from where we are to that objective, right? And that motivates you. You know how you fit into the mission. When you don't know, or nobody's telling you, you're leaving because you have no idea what you're doing, how what you're doing every day is helping. The other leadership point that we do inherently that we learn when we're in the military is we try to be fair and impartial. We do the best we can. Nobody absolutely is fair and impartial. We're humans, right? But we try the best, and we put processes in place to set standards so that we're evaluating people as standardized as possible. And we can point at that and say, this is how I grade you. In fact, I did a brief, I got in trouble for this too. So I sent a brief out and I said, okay, let's talk about what you need to do to get a C, right? Show up on time, be prepared, work all day, don't have customers complaining about you. That's a C. Now, some of you think that's an A. That's a C. That means you're not going to get fired today, but that's a C. That's what I expect out of you. And I had this list of things, right? You come into work, do your job. That's fantastic. That's a C. This is what it takes to be a B, right? Customers rave about you. They talk great about you. You figure out how to help them with their mission set, blah, blah, blah. You got to do everything that's in a C and these things. That's a B. To get an A, you do all the things in a B. I still have that brief. I love it. And then, but no good deeds goes unpunished. And somebody complained, like, are we changing our evaluation criteria to A, B's, and C? No, we're not changing. I'm just giving you an example. But you set, to Howie's earlier point, what's the expectation? Set the correct expectations. What do you expect out of them? You tell soldiers what you expect out of them. You tell them what's a go and what's a no-go. You learn that from the beginning, right? That's important, and that doesn't happen all the time. A lot of times people don't know. They think they're an A when they're actually a C, right? Or they think they're an A, they think they're a C when they're actually a B. And you got to be clear with what your expectations are and how they're performing. And you're not going to have all A players, not when you're building a huge team. C's are good, B's are great. You're going to have some A's in there. But you want to make sure that you've set expectations and standards for the entire team. That's important. And you try to evaluate them and recognize them for exceeding the standard, right? And I tell everybody, here's the other thing you learn. I remember, I'll think of Colonel, the Davardi commander, I'll think of his name in a minute. And he used to say, if you overlook poor performance, you set a new standard of excellence.
Yep.
And when I was a lieutenant, now he said that when I was a lieutenant, that was a gazillion years ago, and I still remember it. He like tattooed on my head. When you overlook poor performance, you set a new standard of excellence. What I tell all my leaders is you need to recognize outstanding performance, but you also need to recognize and mitigate substandard performance. And one bad apple, because if you overlook that, you just told everybody in the organization that is acceptable.
That's
And if
exactly
that's the
right.
message that you are trying to deliver, then you've done it by not doing anything, walking by it, right? Walking by it and not addressing it.
Yeah.
So you need to do both. And a lot of times for leaders, that's the hard thing to teach them, that they got to do it. That's the hard part of the job. They got to take corrective action, and they got to make, that's something that we learn in the military, that you got to do it. That's something that you got to correct. You got to take corrective action as well.
Yeah, Fran, I'll tell you what, man, I work in sports from the youth level to the pro level. I have companies. I see this play out at every single avenue, right? And sports is the best example, especially for our audience. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with a coach that enables the most talented player on the team, but who might be lazy. And I say that, look, this guy's talented, but you're setting a bar here for hard work based on his effort because you're enabling this person. I usually get the question, well, who should I enable? And I said, you want to find the least talented player that's working the hardest and put that person on a pedestal. Well, do I have to play them? That's up to you. But you have to, give that person an understanding of their role. This is something that does not happen enough. You spoke about this earlier. Tell that player, you're not going to play a lot, but your role is to set the standard of hard work for this team. That is an incredibly important role that not everybody gets, right? And then you set that for the whole team. But I think we have a problem right now with standards are continually lowering, right? Because of the way we're managing things. And for those of you out there in the military, you are the ones who are going to have to save us civilians from this because you have the highest of standards, right? So again, we talk about this all the time too, Howie, is that, we hope that there are business owners listening to this show too, to become better for transitioning military members. Raise the standard. Set a high standard. A military person will help you do this, and they will execute the plan, right? This is probably the greatest value of hiring someone from the military, regardless of the work. All right. And look, I've hired military people at my company. Again, we talk about this several times on the show, and the position, they have elevated everything we're doing in that position because it requires it. So I just building off of what you said, and we say this every episode, if you have served in the United States military in some form, you have a skill set that is not readily available by most civilians. You have to know that. You have to understand that there's a high value on that. And you must find a company that either understands the value of that or shares the value of that already. All right. Last thing I'll say, because then I'll get on a soapbox if I don't. The best coaches I've worked with in sports have understood that they didn't have that, but knew they needed it and needed someone to put it in place, right? That is just as good, in my opinion, because they know they need it. There are people that do not think they need it. I've just heard horror stories, even recently, of just piss poor management of the lowest standards. And then I don't know why it's not working. I can't figure out why it's not working. It's you. But you clearly did not do that. And again, I don't meet many people in the military that do that. I'm bitching as a civilian now, but I just want everybody listening to understand that if you are transitioning from the military, understand the value of that skill set that you have. And you all have it. You all have. I've rarely met someone in the military who doesn't have that. Right. In fact, I haven't. I just have people who execute it at different levels.
Yeah.
Please.
And let me just take that to another level, because I firmly believe this in my heart of hearts. When I was in uniform, I believed it when I was working in corporate America, and I believe it to this day. And I'm sure, Fran, you'll agree with this. Nobody wants to be on a losing team, right? Most people I know, and there are a few exceptions, but most people I know want to be on a high performing winning team. They want for someone to clearly tell them what the standards and expectations are and hold them accountable to them. Now, I firmly believe too that if someone is not performing to that standard or that expectation, then it's probably one of three things. Either they weren't properly trained, they weren't given the resources they needed to be successful, or someone did not clearly specify what the standards and expectations were. And all three of those things are what? They're a leader's responsibility. But my point is, nobody goes into work every day or any day. Most people don't go into work any day, whether it's in the military, in corporate America, pick an organization. To fail or be average, they want to be on a high performing winning team. And that's a leader's responsibility to set the standards, set the expectations, clearly communicate them, give the proper training, give them the resources, create the environment for them to be successful, which is what you've done. And what I would venture to say, to reinforce Lee's point, is what most folks coming from a military background are capable of doing. And that can be absolutely applied in whatever position you go to after your time in the military. So, Fran, I think you made some absolutely awesome points, and I really appreciate that. And it's exactly what I think folks in our audience need to hear. So let me kind of shift to something else now, because you just, we were joking about it before we came on, and God bless you, and more power to you. You know, you just recently retired this year from Akamai after a very, very successful corporate career. And you're kind of searching for what's next. I know from doing a little research that you just recently took a position on an advisory board for Squirrel Compliancy Communications. It's from what I could tell, it's a small business. It's based in Raleigh, and it's kind of in the area that you did your 53 work in computer and network security. So again, what I'm trying to do is set people up in our audience for, you will have an opportunity, obviously, to work in something after your time in the military, but there are also, if that appeals to you, you have a skill set and an experience level that could actually help other organizations be successful, either in an advisory capacity or whatever. Kind of talk about how why you took that role, what you're doing, and maybe give some advice and guidance to people that if that appeals to them, what should they be looking for to pursue something like an advisory position like you're pursuing now, Fran?
So interesting story. So I got a call from somebody that you and I both know that used to work at Waka with us. And he asked me, hey, would you be so kind as to have some conversations with my buddy who's starting this small, who's got this small company. It's actually had been around for 2 years and he'd been building software, to be an advisor for him. Would you have the conversation? I'm like, sure, sign me up. And this was actually 18 months ago or so. I was still at Akamai at the time, and I had to do the paperwork, legal, and make sure that it was all fine, because they do compliancy software. It has nothing to do with what Akamai does. So it was good. So small company, it provides the opportunity for you to kind of give back, right? I think it was Lee Iacocca that said, after retirement, you can only golf for so long. Then you got to go find something else. I'm not a golfer, right? So I can only rebuild my greenhouse, cut the grass, and put in a solar implementation for so long. That's only going to keep me busy for so long. Then you got to find something else. So so it's an opportunity to use that experience that I have, both, from the military communications world as well as from building services organizations, to help a small company kind of grow. So it's been great. And Squirrel Compliancy, basically, we're all from, well, I know Howie and I are familiar with DISA super changing all the time, super hard to see whether you're compliant with DISA or not compliant with DISA. They're very time consuming for your team. And what this software does is helps you do that and monitor it constantly.
Oh, interesting.
You're compliant with DISA for the equipment that you've got. That's a problem that, what are we talking now? 25 years old, that's been problematic for 25 years, and nobody's really built something that allows you to get a quick report out on where you are with DISA or with any risk management framework. So whether it's, ISO or DISA, so, DISA DoD sticks. So really cool, great mission, make lives easier for our frickin' IT people. Love that, right? So happy to help them with whatever I can help them with. So what do advisors do, right? What do external advisors do? It's a staff job. You help them come up with course of action, develop, background information on whatever decision you're trying to make, and provide them the best information that you can to allow them to make the best decisions possible for where they're trying to go. You help them with their strategic direction, try to figure out where that objective is, where they are now, build that path between here and there. Something we've done, right? Something that we know how to do, something that we're pretty used to doing. And that's what I'm doing now, which is great. Couple hours a week is perfect.
I love that we got a full breadth of your career from entering the military to the post-military career. I did want to say too, just going back to an earlier point that I love about what your story told us too, is that when I work with organizations, I have this team building philosophy built on the military, and a lot of your stories today are congruent with the stuff that I tell these people. And they go, well, that sounds kind of experimental in terms of like putting a team first in a corporate environment. Do you have any research? I said, yeah, it dates back to June 14th, 1775. It's like, this stuff is out there, people. This stuff is out there for you and your company of the greatest team on the planet. Now, that's going to bring us to Howie's favorite part.
Actually, Clausewitz was way before that, but yeah,
right.
We'll go with that.
Well, I got to give something people are going to understand before the declaration. Yeah. So this is Howie's favorite part of the episode, Fran. So each week, I give our guests sample book titles based on the conversation. So if you were to write a book, these are the book titles I'm recommending you use. Okay. Now there's two of them here. The runner-up, you just kind of handed this one to me, but was Stubborn Irishman That Won't Quit, a memoir. That's going to be your memoir. All right. The Stubborn Irishman That Won't Quit. But this is my favorite one. This goes way back to really early in the conversation, but you have to write this book. Okay. Grunts and Groans, How to Communicate Effectively. Right. I think that's the title.
So let me tell you the story. Let me tell you where that came from. Let me tell you a quick story where that came. So I'm in Ranger School, and we're at one of the crazy things that we needed to do. And one of my teammates comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, what's that anti-aircraft gun that goes and I'm like, a Vulcan?" He's like, "Yeah, that's it." I said, "Now you can call for anti-aircraft, because now you can point, you go, oh. I said, you're basically trained now. That's fantastic."
Yeah. No.
And as Howie can attest to, you don't laugh that many times in Ranger School, but that was one of the ones I laugh over.
No, and the laughs continue to move on. So, Fran, look, we always have the same first question about your career. We always have the same last question. So, Pivotal Moments, our parent company, they seek to strengthen mental health and fitness worldwide. And we've talked about this on the episode a little bit. We all struggle with our own mental health at times and in varying degrees. And if you're willing to share this information, share any struggles that you had with your own mental fitness or that you've seen others struggle with. and share what you've experienced yourself or what others have struggled with, and just how you manage that, because mental fitness is something that's very important, and we are seeking out any way to strengthen that for our audience.
So let me say a couple of things. No, I'm not going to talk about, no, I'm kidding. So let me say a couple of things. First of all, this has been a problem that we're just kind of thinking about now, right? When I say now, in the last, 10 years or so, where we're actually paying attention to it, but it goes back a lot farther than that. I think everybody has challenges, right? Everybody has challenges at one point or another. And then how do you deal with them? How have we always dealt with them? You do more PT, right? PT is always good. Physical training is always good to kind of keep you on the level. Make sure that you've got a schedule. Make sure you're getting up in the morning, you have a purpose for getting up, and you've got like a routine that you go through. Routines are important. You're going to have challenge. Everybody does, right? Everybody has challenges. Try some new things. Howie's going to make fun of me. I tried yoga for the first time.
I'm not going to make fun of you, man.
I tried yoga for the first time. It was hard. It made me sweat, right? And Howie and I would always, it was not something you would have caught me doing 20 years ago, right? It just wasn't one of those things.
And that's when he would have made fun of you. 20 years.
I have learned how to meditate. That's also something that's one of those squishy things. That's hugely important. That has been hugely helpful. That has been amazingly helpful. And for all of the hard bodies that we got out there that are too, manly to do that kind of stuff, you should give it a shot, right? Give it a shot. Look at, just do some basic meditation, try it out for a month or 2 or 3. Same thing with yoga. Try it out for a month or 2 or 3. It's helpful. It's hugely, hugely helpful. And talk to people about it, right? Because that's the other big thing. We all go through it. We've all gone through it, especially transitioning out of the military, just like that 18-month thing. I started going through that, and I started talking to other people who had retired after 20 years. And they're like, you're not balanced. You're off balance, I guess, for that 18-month, time period. Talk to other people. It helps just to realize you're not the only one going through it. All transitions, right? All transitions are high stress. So, I keep myself busy. I always have projects that I'm working on. I do if I'm feeling down or I'm missing like what's meaningful, or I have some of those questions, I'll do my meditation, I'll work on my projects until it fixes itself, right? Eventually I can come out of it.
And Fran, so I'll tell you, what you're saying resonates so much with me, because I've learned some of the same things you have. Unfortunately, it's the latter part of my life, and I wish I had been smart enough to be exposed to these things earlier in my career, earlier in my life, not even just my career, my life. Yeah. But just to kind of pick up on something you said, and I think it's a perfect to kind of use the sports analogy that I think resonates for a lot of us. Like Lee, I have the privilege to coach a youth hockey team, and you'll see this on most teams, especially the higher level teams. But you're going to normally have a coaching staff who knows the X's and O's of that sport. They know what it's going to take to be successful, and they'll teach their players the how to be successful on the field, on the ice, whatever the field of competition is, right? Normally there's going to be, especially at more competitive levels, there's going to be a strength and conditioning coach or strength and conditioning team that's going to take you through a number of workouts and sessions, whatever, that's going to physically prepare you for that competitive level to be as competitive as you possibly can. What rarely exists, and it's starting to, I think it's taking on more of a momentum now, certainly in sports, and it needs to really evolve out beyond sports, is how do you strengthen your mental fitness, your mental muscle, right? And what you've learned in the latter part of your life, what I'm learning in the latter part of my life is, I've put in the time and effort to be to research what I had to do to be successful at my job. I take the time most times to put in the physical training to keep my body in a certain level of preparedness. But I've done relatively little throughout my life to create the mental muscle to deal with the stresses of the day-to-day challenges that we face. And so spending time strengthening that mental muscle, whatever you choose to do, whether it's yoga, walking in nature, meditating, whatever it is, playing an instrument, whatever it is, I really, really encourage you to take Fran's advice and start building that mental muscle that'll help you overcome, whether it's a small challenge, a medium challenge, or sometimes it's a larger challenge. But the neat thing, and Lori Buckout mentioned this in our episode, these things will come to an end, right? If we do the things that Fran's talking about, we will be able to at some point manage and potentially overcome that challenge, and it'll come to an end and you move on. And then when you face it again, you're better prepared and you're stronger mentally to meet that challenge. And so I'm not going to make fun of you at all. In fact, I'm going to applaud you because I think you're absolutely spot on with what you're suggesting here. And I've learned some of the same lessons myself, and I'm working at building my own mental muscle, doing exactly the same things you're describing now. So good on you, Fran. And what I'd like to say as we kind of close out the episode, thank you for being with us today. There, as I listened to what you had to say, there is so much gold here to extract from Fran's experiences of how to prepare yourself and execute a transition, how to be successful in the corporate world or whatever you choose to do after the military, how to strengthen that mental muscle. Fran, I'll tell you, you've given us so much value today, and my hope is that we just get a ton of people to listen to it, and hopefully you can, what you shared today can help them in their challenges as well. So thank you so much for taking the time and committing to be with us today. It was absolutely invaluable what you're sharing with us. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I love what you're doing. I think it's a great mission. I think it's a great opportunity for you to help people who have transitioned or are getting ready to transition like we have. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you asking me.
Cool.
So, Fran, thanks so much again. As how we said, all my sentiments the same, and apologize that my next door apartment complex has decided now would be a great time to cutting up trees and putting them into a blower, but you might hear that in the background. But with that said, you've been listening to Life After the Military, which is powered by Pivotal Moments. You can learn more about the organization at pivotalmoments.org. You can get more inspirational, entertaining, and most importantly, educational content if you need that. For Howie Cohen and Fran Trentley, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us, and make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes soon wherever podcasts can be heard. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on Life After the Military. Have a great day, everybody.